Hello, everybody, and welcome to Life on Mars. I'm Álex, CEO and founder of MarsBased, and in this episode, I'm joined by Simone van Neerven, the founder of reBel.la, a company bringing innovation to all kinds of companies with prior experience at Vueling and Chanel, spearheading the innovation at these big corporations. Simone is a little bit punk rockish. In fact, we discuss a little bit of music, a little bit of this rebellious attitude that around which she has created her own personal branding, and how being rebellious in corporate environments can pay off very, very big dividends if you have the right attitude. So without further ado, let's jump right into this episode. Welcome, Simone. How are you doing? Good to reconnect.
Yes, good to see you again. I'm doing well over here in Amsterdam.
Great. It's funny that I think it's kind of coincidental that we connected for the event, the Corporate Innovation Summit, we put together in March 2020 or late February 2020, right before COVID hit. It was on the evening of, supposedly, there had to be Mobile World Congress, but it got canceled that year. However, a few of us decided we were going to continue with our events. There was a tech spirit, there was our event. In hindsight, not the most brilliant idea. But the feeling of community that we got in those trying times was very intense. But that was right away you left Barcelona. So are you missing Barcelona at all in our ecosystem?
Yeah, I miss Barcelona a lot, and not only because of the nice atmosphere, but also I had such a great team over there. So I miss my team, and I also miss it was like a small community, and everybody knew each other. And the difference between Amsterdam and Barcelona is, I think people here are more, I don't know how do you say that, more closed. While in Barcelona, it's like, hey, join, and if you know someone else, bring them along, and it's more free. And I really love that. There was a lot of serendipity going on, and I think that's also one of the reasons how we met. And I met within a couple of months living in Barcelona. I think I knew a lot of people in the innovation space over there.
Two more coincidences that today we woke up to the news that our venue for this year Corporate Innovation Summit our contract was canceled single-handedly by the venue, which is a pretty disastrous news to wake up to.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we've got a backup, but this is the fourth edition of that event. The other coincidence that you might not be aware of is because I got to know you in that event, I kind of dug deeper into what Vueling does in technology. And so I started meeting people at Vueling, and now we're providers of Vueling. Vueling is our client. We signed Vueling last year, but we started meeting people, and then I was fascinated by all the things going on, which is kind of strange considering the shit website and the terrible experience that Vueling has. But the things that they invest in technology and innovation are pretty impressive. So don't worry, you will not get in trouble. Only me.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because before I did my assignment at Vueling, I worked a long time for KLM. And then everybody was like, oh, KLM. But Vueling was and is much more innovative. And because they also still, well, when I was there, I don't know now, 5 years later, but they had really this startup mindset still. And what I did with my team, I don't know if I have lots of stories there, but my assignment was for 2 years. So I decided that I needed to push. And if I didn't get any pushback, I wasn't doing a good job. So I tried to dwell on the edge and see, okay, how far can we go? I had a secret developers team in Valencia. So that was sort of outside of the organization. So we could very quickly build prototypes and investigate new technologies and innovations. And they could help us a lot without being bothered by this headquarter legal stuff and all that kind of thing. So that was nice. Yeah.
That's something that's still there. I think we work for the innovation department, and they move pretty fast. Considering it's a corporation, right? And considering it's within, the main holding and this intricate relationship of all the big brands of the group and whatnot. But I find it very surprising that they were like, you guys choose your technologies, you guys choose your methodology, you're allowed to do 100% whatever the fuck you want to do,
Yeah.
which doesn't happen like this in corporate. So far, we're very happy. And so I can attest to what you're saying. It's still holding true nowadays.
Yeah, and it's so I reported to Jorge Sacco. He's the CFO of Vueling, and I think he's still there. And unlike many other CFOs, he was very visionary, and he was very open to investing in new things and trying things out. So that was very helpful too, and maybe that's also one of the reasons why this vibe is still there. So yeah,
And
nice.
so you mentioned think about the pushback. Was it a good assist, a good segue to get into what you're doing right now, the rebellious attitude that you think brings innovation? Was it a
Yeah.
plug?
So I've always been a rebel. So, but it's now I dare to
That's your
show
brand.
it more.
That's
Yeah.
your brand. How did that come to be? First of all,
Yeah. So when I quit my job at KLM 7 years ago, that was because I was approached by Vueling for their head of innovation position, and I said I don't want to do it if how do you say that? If you give me a permanent contract, so you can hire me as a freelance or
yeah.
and then we negotiate a little bit, and then they said, "Yeah, okay, let's do that." And I was like, "Shit! Now I have to how do you say that? To build my brand or to go to this government here in Holland to I don't know how you call that, but you have to have your chamber of commerce or something.
Yeah. Chamber of Color. Yeah.
Yeah. So shit, I need a name." And then I asked some friends and I popped some ideas, and everybody liked reBel.la the most. It's from reBel and Bella and this combination. And then I was like, okay, let's do it. And that's how the name was born. But if I look back at my youth and everything, I've always been quite rebellious. So I think it was unconscious or subconscious choice, and now I dare also to build it bigger. And the reason why I say I dare to, because I also with this reBel.la name, I also push clients away because they're like, we don't need rebels and we don't need anything of that, so let's not go there. But for me, I'm like, hey, if clients don't want to work with me because of this name, we are not a good match in the first place. So
I don't know if I'm crossing a line here, but rebellion doesn't come from places of comfort or from upbringings of, environments of abundance. And so I've always been pretty rebellious myself. That's why we have this sort of symphony going on. But because my family came from a very, I wouldn't say poor, but like modest, humble, working class background, right? We had very little to live with. And I had to kind of like fight my way through, divorced parents, like living off subsidies from the state and stuff like that. I'm also left-handed, so I had like all the constraints in the world. Jokes aside, but that maybe brought me to certain cultural tribes, right? Even though I never kind of like associated with any of them 100%, because back then, there would be like, oh, the skinheads, the metalheads, the whatever, like this and that. And I've always been rebellious through music, for instance. And for me, certain music like punk rock and metal spoke to me because it was rebellious. I don't know if you had some sort of connection to music at all, or is it just only business? I don't know in your case.
No, it's also the way I live. When I was 13 years old, I said to my parents, I don't want to have children. And they're like, yeah, sure, you're 13 years old. But I already deeply knew inside that I didn't want that. But it's not a choice. Many people don't make this kind of choice at that age.
Yeah.
And it was against how do you say that? Against
establishment. I mean,
establishment.
Tradition even.
Yeah, so my parents are also from working class, and my grandparents had a farm. And whenever I wanted something, to buy something like a stereo or whatever, my parents said, "Good, great idea." Go at work and earn your own money, and then buy whatever you want. So I also learned a lot to work really hard and not to give up. And in my upbringing, I think what is also very transformational for me is everybody always said, you're a girl, so don't leave it, and don't bother that much, and why are you trying so hard, and just leave it. And I was like, leave it? Fuck it. And so I have like a strong, deep urge to maybe to prove myself or to show the world that I can do stuff. And that's also a big driver for me. And maybe, a short story, because it's a fun story, but also it shows that I'm passionate about like this female-male thing, because I experience as a female sometimes that I'm treated differently. So when I was 4 years old, we were in kindergarten. I don't know how you say that in Spanish, but like preschool, right?
Yeah.
And then in Holland, we don't have the Christmas. We don't have Santa Claus at Christmas, but we have Sinterklaas, which is at December 5th. Similar guy, whatever. He also gives presents. So he came to the kindergarten school and he had presents for everyone. So he had, for the boys, he had a toy truck. And for the girls, he had a doll.
Of course.
And
yeah.
I screamed for a very long time until I got this toy truck, because I really I didn't want to have the doll. And so I think I was already like, I don't know, pushing
Rebellious.
the limits, fighting against,
fighting against the established norm. Finally, when I was a kid, I was always playing with dolls myself. So we should have changed places.
Yeah, exactly.
But probably, I don't know if in your case, like in my case, kind of when I grew up, I started working, even though you have your preconceptions and you can be as rebellious as you want in society, I remember going to the demonstration against the war in Iraq and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then you start working, and the whole establishment, the whole status quo, like your family or the traditions or what you read on the news, what is passed on is, at work, you don't discuss politics, you don't discuss, no football, no politics, no religion, stuff like that. So that, and back then you couldn't be like left wing, at least in Spain, right? The zeitgeist was another. And so for me, it was pretty shocking. I had to bite my tongue pretty often when I started at Deloitte, like the most corporate environment. So how did you manage the internal frustration of having to bite your tongue? If you had to, I'm assuming you had to in your corporate years.
Yeah, so it's funny, right? Because in the time that I graduated from university, it was normal to go to a large corporate, right? But today, it's very cool to go and build your own startup. So I wish I was born like 20 years later, because I think I'm much more like an entrepreneur than someone who fits in the corporate, how do you say that? The corporate culture. So what happened is I started with first the Royal Dutch Mail Company, which was a huge corporate. And then after 2 years, I switched to KLM. So I have been at KLM for like 16 years. And it's interesting because you already see on the uniforms how important someone is. The more stripes, the more important. So it was a very hierarchical organization. So, and there I was. I was like, fuck hierarchy. And if I have an idea, I'm going to do it. So yes, I had to bite off my tongue quite often. On the other hand, I also built or created my own job 5 or 6 times, just out of nothing. Then I had my normal job, and then I saw some things that were not going well, or I had an idea, and then I was like, oh, maybe we can do something with that. And then it started to work out, and then they made it my job, and then I got bored again, and then the same happened. So what I have been rebellious in that sense, but I always made sure that I achieved very well results. So they could never say, well, you're doing something strange and you're not performing, so we're going to kick you out. They were always like, yeah, she might be pushing the boundaries, but she is kicking ass also. Yeah.
But you're delivering, right? That's the whole thing. Well, I don't know. Like I remember when I was at Deloitte and company I moved afterwards, similar kind of company. I was always hitting the ceiling, right? Or like of the corporate, they had the progression, your was the career plan, and because I mentally didn't fit any of these models, I was always hitting like roadblocks, walls, and all of that. We don't do things this way, and I'm like, I was seeing the same things happening in society and in work, right? In the workplace, which is we always have done things like this way, tradition, blah blah blah. It's like this shit is not for me. Maybe because I'm near to the divergent, right? So I'm diagnosed Asperger's. So for me, it's really hard to accept authority, and my preconception of law and rules are like it's pretty diffuse. And so you try to be entrepreneurial. I discovered I was trying to be entrepreneurial in an environment that this kind of creativity wasn't allowed, right? Because it's built for the 80%, the power law of people, right? If you're an outlier, you're not built for this kind of companies. But maybe that taught me not only how to do things, but how not to do things. So that accumulation of frustration, biting my tongue, maybe that's what gave me the inspiration to start a company like MarsBased, which is, hey, it's 100% the opposite of what these guys are doing over here. So my point, the question being, and I know it's a very long preface to this question, is had I not had all of this accumulated frustration, maybe we wouldn't have had the idea to innovate so much in creating a consultancy, this DNA of a startup, 100% remote, more expensive than the rest, specialists versus generalists and stuff like that. Where did you get your ideas from? Did you experience this sort of like relief after getting out of the corporate and now playing on your terms?
Yeah. So my foundation with KLM is very beneficial because I know how these large corporations work. I know how to make results or get to results. I know how the politics are played. So that's very fundamental for the things I do right now. I work with large brands sometimes, but also small brands, NGOs, foundations. It's like everybody is always looking like me as this. There's no logical sense in my client portfolio, and that's exactly what I want. Because I also love the diversity of all these different kind of organizations. And although these organizations are different, they have similarities. What I learned from KLM is that you can achieve fucking great results by being rebellious. And I want to inspire organizations that they should listen more and embrace their rebels, because those are the ones who get the ball rolling. And now most of the time they are stopping this ball from rolling. And what I see is I get a lot of private messages from people who identify as a rebel, and they get super frustrated and they ask me to mentor them or what are my tips for them. And I think that's so much lost potential for large organizations. So for me, the biggest driver of what I do, the things I do, what comes from a lot of frustration that I have from my corporate background. Yeah.
Well, you refer a lot to rebels, but I wonder if there's any difference between a rebel in a corporate and an intrapreneur, which is a word that's overutilized. I don't know if you think they are the same or not, just to understand this role a little bit better.
It's difficult because everybody has so many different kind of definitions. For me, entrepreneur are people who are most of the time dedicated to innovation or bringing new stuff. Well, rebels can also be the ones who just have a normal job in a normal team and they're not working on the next big thing, but they can still challenge the status quo, come up with new ideas to improve the work environment. So there's overlap between entrepreneur and rebels, but I also think rebels are everywhere, and some show it more than others. Yeah. So entrepreneur is more of like a job description, and rebel is more like how do you say that? It's within people. I don't know.
It's an attitude, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, okay, now it's much more clear to me, because fundamentally, working, we don't technically work in innovation as such, but every now and then we get projects that are innovative, right?
Yeah.
Usually for the innovation department, but sometimes the innovation lies outside of the innovation departments, right? Because from the outside perspective, when you see like a large corporation, say like Welling or FC Barcelona or Ford or whatever, you think like, oh, the innovation of Ford is creating flying cars. That's what their innovation department is working on. Probably that's not true. Probably it's like, hey, no, we need to change the material of the tires so that it degrades less over time. Or we have to make it 5% more aerodynamic.
Yeah.
Or, things like that they look minuscule, but because of the sheer volume of cars they produce, the gains might be potentially in hundreds of millions every year, right? So innovation, I think in a corporation, you tell me this, but can happen in every department, but it will only happen if it has a rebel, right?
Yeah.
If you get a rebel in the accounting department, like, no, we will start using this tool, or we'll do it this way.
Exactly. Yeah. So when I was head of innovation at Welling, I worked in 3 different horizons, and I use this a lot because in Horizon 1, it's more like how can we improve the current business, right? How can we come up with a better website or stuff like that? Just to mention something.
Yeah, just casually.
Yeah. So, and when we worked on Horizon 2, it's more like what would be the future customer experience for like in 5 years from now. So we created like also a video or an animation where we started at home, and we had luggage pickup at home, and we had transport from the airport to the airport, from home to the airport, and it was all integrated. So that was already pushing a little bit like the comfort zone of Welling. And then for Horizon 3, I was working on this complete crazy shit. And I
like
remember...
What? Give me an example or two.
I remember. So this is a true story. We had reframed the vision of Welling. And Welling said, we want to have the best customer experience, low-cost airline with the best customer experience, and blah, blah. And I didn't find that very inspiring. So with my team, we flipped it, and we rethought the assumptions underlying this vision. And then we came to the conclusion that it should be an airline is in the business of making connections everywhere, every day. And it's so and coming to that conclusion, we said, okay, that opened up the space. So we started to see how can we connect people more with other ways than just bringing them from airport A to airport B. And then we did some research, and this was early 29. And we did some research, and we found something. So I went to the CEO of Welling, and I said, I have a brilliant idea. I have a small company, and they do something in online connections. We need to invest in them, and they're called Zoom. And this CEO,
way.
And this CEO looked at me like, "Wow, she's crazy." And so we were not allowed to do any more research. And a year later, no one was in the plane, and everybody was Zooming. So, lost opportunity. Yeah, but that's for me. It's an innovation team should work on all these 3 things, or at least an organization should have teams working on these 3 horizons. Yeah,
I like your approach to innovation because it's, let me put it bluntly, it's no bullshit. It's straight to the point. It's like your book, right? It's short, straight to the point, and most business books are full of fluff. It's hard to separate the grain from the chaff,
Yeah.
or they are like, I don't know if you're familiar, like one of the books that I just don't like, but people seem to love, is the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by
Oh
Mark
yeah.
Manson,
Yeah.
right? So that book was a perfect blog post with
Yeah.
400 filler pages,
Yeah.
because it's just like example after example after example. And most business books are like that. Very few business books deserve my recognition because it's like 80 pages of great stuff and then 400 pages of shit.
Yeah.
Your content and your message has always struck me as, you're probably familiar with Basecamp or 37 Signals. They're no nonsense, no bullshit. They've got like very short books as well, that they are basically just blog posts
Yeah.
that they have
Yeah.
readapted a little bit. And so they are small pills of wisdom, so to call them, and easy to read, like maybe in a day you read them through, and all of it is actionable. All of it, like, you don't have to actually spend hours and hours trying to understand a concept. It's like, oh, no meetings, or no email, or one free day a week, stuff like that, right? Good, simple concepts. And I don't know, I think your rebellious spirit is finding more acceptance in the general public because it resonates with people, because it's genuine and authentic. Like, is that something premeditated, or just came to be like naturally and organically like this?
So I studied mathematics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Quite a
And
plot twist.
yeah. But the reason why I say that is that I was not like a natural born. I didn't have to read anything and I understood it. I had to work for it, but still, I managed to get my degree there. What mathematics learned me is there is always a solution. Just try what the first. If the first thing is not working, try the next and the next. So it taught me there's always a solution, which comes in handy with innovation. And I'm not scared for complex stuff. But during my 4 years or 5 years at university, I also had the opportunity to pick some courses myself. So we had like we were allowed to do that, and everybody was choosing this kind of traditional classes, and I looked at psychology and stuff like that, and then I found a course which was I don't know how you call it, journalism.
Yeah.
But then scientific journalism. And then I had assignments that I had to interview like physicists who were doing a PhD on a topic I had no idea about. And then I had to write down a piece that everybody would understand. So that really pushed me to translate really complex stuff to basic stuff that everybody could read. And I think that was a seed that was planted that I really like to do. I like to translate complex stuff into very simple, easy to understand things, because I also learned during my corporate career that if it's going to be complex, people don't accept it, they'll walk away and nothing ever happens. But if you make it easy to understand and fun and maybe also inspiring, or maybe even pushes for some critical thinking, or maybe sometimes provoking, then something happens, right? Then other people, you tap in their emotions, and then you can build on that forward. So long answer, but I love to create. So I also do a lot with visuals. Sometimes it's just much better to have one visual than 10 pages. So I also put a lot of time in when I'm on stage and doing keynotes. I always have a lot of visuals, and people always say that they like my visuals. Because I think that is also a way to communicate a message, right? So,
in fact, I think it's kind of complex to try to explain your methodology, because one thing you mentioned that really resonates with me is you don't have an ideal customer profile. You don't have an idea, like you work for NGOs, you work for startups, you work for corporates, you work for this and that, which is sort of like what we do here. Like when they ask me, like, who's your ideal customer? So like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, not that I don't know, I do know. It's like pretty much everybody is, if you want to work with me, you're my ideal customer, right? But we don't have a prepackaged solution for sports companies or for SMBs or for public administration. Why? Because we do bespoke stuff. It's very artisanal, right? I've got the feeling that yours is the same approach. Like, is you don't have a prepackaged methodology. You have some common points, right? But you enter a company and it's a consultation process, right? How do you start building something for a company from day zero, for instance?
Yeah. No, I love that you say that, because I really don't believe there is a one-size-fits-all approach to anything.
Okay.
So whoever wants to sell you a one-size-fits-all approach, I would walk away immediately if I would be a company.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
right?
Not for innovation. Like you say in general. I mean,
well, in general, because I believe there are frameworks that you can use, but you have to make it modular, right? So I have like a lot of tools I can use, but it's not like, okay, client, and we're going to do A, B, C, D. No, I'm like, I think you need this framework and maybe that approach, and then I do this workshop to create the right mindset. And then with another customer, it's like totally different. Because, I've seen so many different kind of leadership styles and environments that I think it's much more valuable to. But typically, what I do is when I have long-term collaborations with organizations, I try to get a sense of the organization. So I visit the plant or I visit the organization several times, and I try to work with teams so that I really get a much better understanding of what they are about and what the people are about and what the culture is. And then I come to some solutions, or I start working. But my assignments always start very vague. They call me and like, hey, Simone, we need to do something with innovation or change. Can you help us? And then I always say, oh, yeah, sure. And that's how it starts. And we both know there's sort of like a trust-based, like she has done well in the past, so she will do well here too. And I believe that every organization, you have a lot of people who are motivated. You have a lot of rebels. Some are hidden, who can help you forward to get the organization moving forward.
That's a perfect asset, because I was going to ask, your methodology, as you said, like, it's not prepackaged. At the same time, you're also like rebellious in nature. You've got these not aggressive, but a bit like blunt opinions. And so that come across as easy to dismiss by a big corporation, like, oh, no, we don't like that profile. It's a hard sell, right?
Yeah, it is.
So, it's mostly you start working for our companies because of recommendation, because of your credentials in the past. So, but how do you measure the impact of your projects? Is there any sort of standardized KPI in all of the projects that you've done so far?
True answer?
I assume it's no, there isn't, right?
No. Okay. But my clients are always very enthusiastic. So
how do you measure the return on investment in these kind of projects? That's I don't really ask this to innovation people, and most of the time it's like, well, we don't know, or sometimes it's just like revenue and, like, for instance, corporate venturing, right? Or corporate innovation is like usually something will not work, but because they have an innovation department, they've got better employee retention.
Yeah.
And that's enough.
Yeah.
Right? Wow.
Yeah. So I worked for Chanel, right? Did you know or not? So
Chanel?
Chanel.
Oh, yeah, Chanel. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because, well, you only see this, but I never have a bag, or so I'm not like the typical Chanel person.
Yeah.
And then they asked me, hey, would you like to help us out? And I was like, are you sure? Because, well, look at me. And I also said, like, my company name is reBel.la. Are you really, that's not just because it sounds nice.
Yeah.
And they said, yeah, we really need that. So I helped the CIO of Europe for 2 or 3 years. And my main assignment was to boost the innovation mindset of the team. How do you measure that? So I gave workshops and I experimented in some boutiques and stuff like that. So, but people were starting to ask different kind of questions because I was always challenging them. So maybe that was enough for the CIO, is that he saw that his team was growing, or yeah.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like in innovation, like for instance, I remember in that event in Corporate Summit 2020, one of the somebody shared that, I don't remember which was it. Definitely, I think it was not you, but somebody said, like, look, one of the hard truths of corporate innovation is that just by saying that you're innovating, the share value goes up, and that's enough. You're getting paid back and, price per share, exposure, or advertising. And
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that is terrible.
Yeah,
At the
it
same
is.
time, it's like, oh, it works, So,
Yeah, and so I really don't like that. So early on, we talked about result driven, and I
yeah,
get really excited if I accomplish something, if I really am
yeah,
able to make a change. But for me, making a change is not only implementing a new service or improving something or coming up with a total new business idea. It's also if I see people are growing and if they are getting more confident in that they can be themselves, that they are able to ask questions that they didn't dare to ask before, that they start to think more critically, that they learn how to do that in a constructive way. So that's not destructive, because I also know some rebels who can be quite destructive. So, well, I've been there too. Well,
sounds like me.
but I think, yeah, so that's also for me a big result. And I get quite a lot of messages from people who say, so I also write this newsletter every 2 weeks. I don't know if you have seen it, but it's called Ask Dr. Rebel. And then people can ask me any kind of question about rebellious behavior. And it can be a rebel, but it can also be a coworker or a manager. And what I try to do is give like a different kind of perspective on a topic. So the other day I wrote something about yes, but, because everybody is always complaining about people who say yes, but I think they're
Yes.
very valuable. Well, you need them. You don't need them during ideation, but you need them during implementation or so people have ideas about rebels, and I try to flip that, and I try to say, but look at the good side of this kind of behavior. So for me, a great result is also creating an environment where people can be themselves, where when there are rebels, they are not, how do you say that? They are not avoided or but that they're actually embraced, and that their skills are actually used to make the team result even better. So, yeah.
Yeah, but certainly team satisfaction is not, how we say it, like, doesn't sign contracts, right? There must be something else, at least in the short to mid-term. We know innovation might take time. Some innovation might be like reflect on the branding, and it comes back 7 years after you've left the company, right? But there have to be some sort of like goals or milestones or KPIs you have to hit. Otherwise, they don't renew your contract, right? So how do you approach this? Is that something that your clients define? You define? Like, how does it work in your methodology?
Yeah, no, it
I'm
sounds
results oriented, and I don't know. Like, maybe I'm being too much of an engineer.
It's I with many clients I don't have like a real specific KPI. as crazy as it sounds. And some clients, it's me who decides to stop the contract and not the client. Most often after 2-3 years, it's like, okay, the energy is out now. I think I've get the ball moving or get the things moving, and now it's up to you. And during the 2 or 3 years that I'm working with organizations, I also try to lead, guide people or learn people how to facilitate and stuff like that, so that it still can continue when I'm away. So I teach people how to do things. And then after 2-3 years, then my time is then for me it feels like, okay, I think now is the time to leave. So most of the time it's me who is leaving, and it's not the client who says, okay, Simone, thank you very much.
So you're creating some sort of sense of scarcity as well, like, or putting some sense of urgency that, look, I typically don't renew my contracts after year 2. And so that signals that you're in high demand, right? And there's somebody else waiting with a contract for you, and they're like, okay, fine, we'll do whatever, right?
Yeah.
Do they actually take action or not really? Because they're slow movers.
Yeah, it depends. Different kind of clients, different. So yeah, I don't know if clients think like that. It's just for me, I really want to do the best for the company. And it's not that I want to create some kind of sense around me like, hey, it's maybe hard to explain. And sometimes I have to think about my own. Sometimes I'm reflecting on what am I doing? What am I bringing for organizations? How are things going? Is this what I want? Or do I need to be more specific and define KPIs? But yeah.
No worries. No. I get the feeling, because when I was freelancing 15 years ago, Jesus Christ, that reveals my age. I was like that just because I didn't need it, right? I was doing a project here and there. It's like, this project, this other, not so, e-commerce, not interesting, right? Yet another website or WordPress, like, no, not gonna touch that shit. So I can totally relate to that. And so if you play on your terms, it's much more fun. Let's give a couple minutes to like the newsletter you mentioned and the book, right? Building a personal brand like you have built over the years, comes with a community, with a tribe, right? I don't know if that's intentional or not, but I didn't know about the newsletter. I knew about the book. And so, but it comes also with a high price, which is the pressure of having to put out original content every now and then. I don't know, what is your idea machine? Like 3 months ago, I also launched my own personal newsletter, right? And I have big opinions that I cannot express on the MarsBased blog sometimes. And so it's more like personal stuff. Fine, there's a clear distinction. For you, business and your own opinions are probably the same, right? Because you're a person and a personal brand, but not a company, right?
Exactly.
How do you work with that, and how is the public reacting?
It's so I get I'm overloaded with ideas. So there's
You're
no
creative
problem about and I get my inspiration from very different kind of sources, mostly not thick books, but every now and then. But a lot of podcasts I listen. I randomly listen podcasts. So sometimes it's like, okay, this is someone. I'm part of a WhatsApp group here in Holland, and it's called the Podcast Club. And a lot of podcasts are shared, and it's a very diverse group. So a lot of diversity of podcasts. And it forces me to listen stuff that are outside of my bubble. And it's fun because it brings me new stuff. So I get a lot of ideas. And sometimes it's just a simple sentence that makes that's for me the start of a whole new newsletter. So now, for instance, I'm working on the newsletter about focus, because I think there's too much focus on focus.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I think sometimes you need to let go. And then that's because I was in an organization and everybody was pushing each other, and then someone was looking outside the window and then others were complaining about that. And I said, well, probably this guy is getting now his ideas. And so what I try to do with my newsletter is make people think. So I just mentioned about yes, but everybody's always complaining about that. And I give the opposite perspective on that. And I think this is also what my brand is all about. It's like, okay, what I say, you don't necessarily have to agree with what I say. But for me, a discussion is not about who is winning the discussion, but a discussion is about that you make the other person think, right? I love it when I have conversations. When I walk away, I'm like, shit, I didn't think about it that way. And that's also what I want to do. And that's also what my brand is about. And my books, you say one book, I have 3. It's a series. I want to bring the rebel perspective, the rebel mindset from different perspectives. So one is for the rebel, it's themselves, because it's called, oh no, I'm a rebel, now what?
Yeah, I remember that one.
And then I have one for manager. It's like, oh shit, our rebels are leaving. I want to bridge these worlds because I see so much polarization in the world in general, but also on the work floor between rebels or people who can think differently versus people who follow establishment. And I want to show that you need both, and it's okay. So that's what my brand is all about. And then knowing that, it's not hard to find my topics and write or publish about that from that perspective.
Is that somehow like bringing you new clients because you have become a thought leader, right? And so when you have a truly distinct voice like yours, that creates a tribe, and that attracts also potential customers. Like, hey, I like what she's saying. I want to work with her, right?
Yeah.
It attracts talent as well. But I don't know if you're hiring or you're still working alone. But it happens to us. But also it brings clients because you think differently.
Yeah, and so what I also said, it also pushes away clients because they're like, oh, she's too rebellious. But that's fine, because then we were the match in the first place. But I often get requests for keynotes because people read articles. And I also publish for the largest management platform here in Holland. I write monthly columns for them. So that's also fun. And but so what I also see is you ask me about how do you get to original content. And it's what I struggle with a lot is that, for instance, on LinkedIn, you see a lot of posts that get thousands of likes. And then I look at it and then I think the content is like...
It's fucking garbage, right? Yeah.
And then
but it's like, optimized for the algorithm.
I know. But I'm like, I really don't want to go there. I don't want to play the game. And then, but sometimes I'm like, then I think I have written something really cool and it doesn't resonate. You really have to be resilient to keep going, because it's easy to quit.
Yeah, for me, I share that frustration when I open LinkedIn and I see that mostly is garbage. And I'm like, how is this fucking shit getting 10,000 likes? And I put some interesting thought or like maybe the next event or whatever blog post I spent 5 hours writing, and it gets 1 thumbs up. And I'm like, this is horrible. At the same time, I'm thinking like, well, but in the long term, this other prefabricated ChatGPT generated garbage will be dismissed. It will be forgotten. And the ones having like an authentic vision, solution, discourse, and all of that, we will be highly esteemed, I would say, like, and we will be remembered, right?
Yeah.
We'll have detractors, of course, many, but we'll be remembered because we're sharing original content.
Yeah.
Not like stuff that it's framed to or design architected to kind of like fit into the algorithm. But in 2 years, it disappears because no one is going to like all of these bullet points with emojis and whatever, like optimized for LinkedIn. It just doesn't resonate with anybody, right? It's like nowadays you create stuff that creates outrage. It performs like I tried a few weeks ago. I did an experiment, and within a couple of weeks, I posted 3 or 4 things out of my scope, but they created outrage, right?
Yeah.
And just to test the waters.
Yeah.
And it went boom. It went massive, right? And so now I'm starting to do some shit posting on LinkedIn, basically like ditching companies like Globo and stuff like that. But it's just hitting massive scale. I'm like, this is horrible. I mean, it works to get my message out there. It's original content, don't get me wrong. But that's not what I want to be known for, right? So you have these cognitive dissonance of like saying like, I really don't want to do that. At the same time, dopamine hits and the reach. Like if you leave off exposure, you have to do it. So I understand why people sell out.
Yeah. No, I still I keep my rebellious mind. I'm like, I'm going to stick with what I do, and then I don't care. But I don't want to follow the crowd here. I'm just going to continue. But it's difficult, and it's tempting to go along with what everybody else does. But
it is difficult because like, well, I mean, there's this saying in innovation, right? That there is, if you follow everybody else's or someone else's paths, you're never gonna go somewhere new, right?
Yeah.
And so I understand. At the same time, it works. So sometimes you got to do it to get from A to B, because in point B, you will have more resources. And if you are rebellious too early, maybe that will close all of the doors. So it's a compromise. It's a trade-off that is very complicated to solve.
Yes.
But
we only know if we meet again in a couple of years, and then we can look back and then say, well, did it work or not? Yeah.
Well, I mean, to your point, saying like sometimes it just like it qualifies your clients, right? I know, like for instance, we've been very political in certain things publicly as a company, and I know we're never going to work with certain companies because they will be like, oh no, we don't want to work with you. Like 2017, when the Catalan independence process was going on, like we're super public about that. We're in favor, we're pro Catalan independence. And we probably lost some potential clients. At the same time, some companies are like, we want to work with you guys.
Exactly.
So it qualified. It just removed the filter. It accelerated the process, right? Maybe we lost some potential candidates that they will never work for us. I don't know, if you don't want to work with me because of my political views, then I don't want to work with you, right? I totally respect different opinions, but if you have a problem with that, then you don't have a place here. Simone, before wrapping it up, we got a signature question in the podcast that totally caught you off guard, because it totally catches everybody off guard. But it's basically, what has been your most expensive fuck up in a company that you have to own up to it? It's got to be yours. Something you did, a decision of yours that was like, oh, wow, yeah, that cost a lot of money to the company.
Oh, shit. That's a difficult one.
Take your time. We want to like, I share thousands of my fuck ups every now and then. So probably one per episode.
You asked the most expensive one, right? So that means
or it has to be expensive, like probably. But something they say like, oh yeah, we totally squandered, like we built the prototype we didn't need, and we never launched that. We spent like 100K on that or something like that.
Well, when I was at Vueling, there's one example, but there are more. But when I was at Vueling, I had the vision to work on a platform that would recommend the opposite. So that you would not like the sort of like the recommendations, like the obvious things. If you like this, then you like that.
Right.
I wanted to have like a surprise in there. So I wanted like that we have a recommender, and then said, if you like this, and then come up with something very surprising, but still a match, but not. So we spent like, I think, 100,000 euros to work out that idea, because it was also based on personalization. So we needed to personalize and then say, okay, we're not going to do the obvious thing, but the non-obvious. But it was hard to get people convinced. But I'd spent like 100,000 euros on that, I think.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. I remember we had Vicente Marti, who used to be like the COO or CFO back in the day, and he shared something about Willing. He was in charge of the checkout process for whatever reason, and then he tried something else, but in the process of doing so, he removed the credit card validation. And so for like a day, they couldn't charge customers. They lost like, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of euros in revenue because people couldn't fucking buy the plane tickets. So
yeah, exactly. And then it went viral, and then everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one more minute for you to share. I'm rolling out the red carpet here. So what have you got in store to share? Like, what can we expect of you? New books, plug in your newsletter as well. So anything you want to say and share?
Yeah, so books, I started with one. It became 3 because someone said to me, oh, it's going to be a series. So probably there are going to be more editions. I'm thinking about a rebel toolbook. So that helps you to become more rebellious or to deal with rebels. There are already a lot of rebel tools on my website. So if you want a preview of the tools, you can assess your Taylor Swift innovation on my website and all that kind of crazy stuff. I do that for fun. My newsletter, if you want to subscribe, you can subscribe on LinkedIn, but also on Substack, whatever you want. And I would appreciate if people would do that if they really like it. And sometimes let me know that they like it, so that all the effort I put in is also not for nothing, right? That you write for a whole day on a newsletter and then you don't get any response. So it would be nice if people also sometimes say, hey, that was a really nice thought or whatever. That's it.
Let me echo that. I know the feeling. I share the feeling. And then when you ask people directly, they're like, no, I totally love it. Like, I like that one and this one where you talk about this and that. I'm like, then fucking reply to it, motherfucker, because it feels like talking to the void, But I understand, like, you don't know you can actually reply to a newsletter, right?
Yeah, and if you have friends over there in Barcelona or wherever who want a thought-provoking but fun keynote, they can also reach out to me. I think more rebelliousness on stage. Yeah.
I assume you don't get free flights from Willing for life, right? Because you haven't worked at that.
And also not for KLM. No. I did an assignment for KLM and that was during COVID, and then they had no money, and I said, oh, you can pay me in business class tickets. And they did.
Yeah. Oh,
so
wow.
I'm open to how do you say that?
Exchange, right? So it's kind of like swapping the services.
Exactly.
Nice. Yeah. Simone, thank you, Val.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. Looking forward to, I will sign up to the newsletter. And sounds like something interesting. Hope we can coincide in another event one day.
Exactly. In Barcelona.
That's it.
Thanks. Thanks for the time.